So to help us understand what it's like to transition into an international leadership role, we have Peter Harris with me. Peter, how are you?
Hey, Jason, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Really well, thanks. So we're going to get onto the topic of international leadership shortly. That's what we're going to be speaking about. But I thought it might be worthwhile taking a walk down memory lane first up, to see if you can think back to when you first transitioned into your first leadership role. So
Okay.
what was it? Tell me about it,
Uh,
you know.
yeah, it was a while ago now. It was kind of early 90s, I think. I was probably early 90s. I was probably in my early 20s, 22 or 23, and I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to be marketing manager at Tab Limited in my client-side days. So I'd been working at the Tab in a management traineeship for 4 or 5 years by then, and I got a chance to step up into the marketing role, and that was both scary and exciting at the same time. Now look back, I was pretty young, and
That is a young age, actually. I mean, to transition to that. I mean, as part of that program, then does that mean that you did you get the training to move into that role? You know, or you're thrown in the deep end? What was sort of that experience like?
yeah, I remember it feeling like I was thrown in the deep end. The reality is I'd kind of finished a business degree, so I guess in some part of that I'd learn about management. But the real training was that I'd spent 4 or 5 years in that management traineeship, working with and listening and watching some really good leaders, some pretty poor ones as well, to be honest. So I don't think it was any formal training on how to be a leader, but it was more just watching and learning from good leaders along the way.
I mean, looking at others and modeling is a pretty common way for people to develop their skills and to develop their style. I mean, if you're thinking back now, obviously we're a number of years on, not that many, Pete. You're still a bit of a spring chicken, right?
Quite
But
a few.
what do what do you know now that you wish your younger self had known back then? Is there anything that sort of springs to mind that you think, wow, if I'd only just known that, or that's probably something in hindsight that I probably could have done a better job at in that first role, all things considered, given you hadn't had any
Yeah.
previous experience?
Yeah, good question. I think, uh, in those days, I wish I had known that you don't have to know it all. I think back then I thought that if you're the boss or you're the leader, you need to make all the decisions, yes, but you don't have to know everything. And I was lucky I kind of learned that along the way. You got to put a team together. Some people know more than you about certain subjects. You need to get to know them, you need to trust them, and you need to kind of be able to, without having to know everything yourself. So that was probably the first thing. The biggest thing I've learned over time, probably, and I certainly didn't know this when I was 22 or 23, was the importance when you have a team, if you're a leader, of being able to show vulnerability. I think we're always taught not to be vulnerable as a leader, but the reality is that I've learned is that that's what people want to see. They want to see the real you, and they want to see you making decisions and listening to people and being a little bit vulnerable yourself. So I probably could have known that. I could have learned that faster in my life.
This is interesting because that's probably something that, you know, 20 years ago or so, that word maybe never would have been mentioned in the
Yeah.
world of leadership, but now it seems to be something that people are speaking about more often, which I think is probably a good thing. But also the fact that you're giving that kind of advice, it probably shows how things are transitioning in the world of leadership.
I think so.
As a word,
Definitely. I mean, in those days, it was all about power and control and structure and how high you could get up. And then all of a sudden you're in charge and you could sign off things at a certain level. But quickly you learn that you just can't know everything, and you need to kind of put people together that can bring in skills. And particularly these days, it's a lot's happened over the last 10 years, and there's a lot of skills that certainly weren't taught when I was at university, and the whole digital marketing part of it. I've had to bring in people that are much more experts than me in this space, and I've learned a lot from them along the way. You just need to guide them.
The decision-making element and not knowing everything is also a point that I want to just reflect on for a second, because um, uh, some people have told me that that's where they find their biggest pressure in a role even today. Is that something that you've come to terms with, or is that something that you think has been that others struggle with? What's your experience around that pressure from people that to be able to always know the right answer and be able to make always the best decisions?
Yeah, it's a good question again. You're just never going to get everything right. that's the thing that you learn.
Mm.
Not every decision is going to work for you. You use a bit of experience. I tend to talk to people that are expert in this or have been there, done that before, and then you just got to make a judgment call, knowing that if it's not right, you need to own that, and you need to kind of quickly solve that. So, making decisions is easy. Cleaning up wrong decisions quickly is much more difficult, but it's really worthwhile, and you just continually learn.
Yeah,
You just
consulting.
can't get everything right.
Yeah, consulting others. I really like that as a point actually, because it's we'll ask about your tips for leaders transitioning into international leadership roles shortly, which might be a segue for me to actually ask you, because we've known each other for quite some time, and when we first met, you're running an Australian-based company, Conwell
Yep.
Brunton Research Consultancy, based in Australia,
Yep.
and then sort of moved over to a company called Vision Critical, which was based in Canada. So I'd love
Hmm.
to get your opinion about that transition. Moving into a role which, sure, the companies were similar but very different. To a large extent, but the transition from being a domestic organization and a domestic leader to someone who was then running a domestic business but reporting into an international boss.
Yeah, it was a big change. Well, first thing, you have to be a bit flexible with your time because the world's not on one time zone, and your life changes a little bit. The second thing is, and I was lucky because I found a Canadian-driven company or led company, culturally very similar to an Australian company. We don't
Okay.
take ourselves too seriously all the time. We really understand how to kind of work hard and then celebrate, and just strategically, and the way we think and make decisions was not too dissimilar. I think it's different than my experience with American companies, that the culture is different. So really just trying understanding what is going on in head office becomes more difficult because you're not there. You need to understand, you understand your business in Australia or in Asia Pac, but you really need to understand what is happening in the center of the business and understand where all the pressures are coming from. So you can kind of make sure that you keep your own patch good, but you can also contribute to what's happening in the center of the business. So that was really something I did have to learn quickly.
Yeah, it's I mean, I was able to see the transition from the company. So we're talking still about Vision Critical and a company that was, well, relatively very small in Australia and Asia Pacific
Yeah,
when you came on board, to growing that to becoming, a business. I remember you ran out of office space a couple times from memory.
yeah, yeah,
So, what are your learnings about leading people who aren't necessarily based then in your own office as well?
yeah. So, well, there's two things. I was lucky at Vision Critical because there was good leaders there at the time, and I was able to educate them on what's happening in my market. And I was lucky enough they kind of left me alone, and they appreciated that I understood the market. But in turn, you have to understand what's happening again overseas. So when my responsibilities moved to Asia Pacific, I had to run a team in Singapore and Hong Kong, up in China, Japan. Um, you have to realize that you don't understand those markets as well as the people working in them, and that's a really hard thing to get your head around. It's a really
Mm.
hard thing when you're a North American based company to drive through as well, but you really have to do it. I mean, you can't understand every market, and every market's nuances are different. You really need to you need to work with people on the ground that understand that market, to understand how business works, how deals get done, how people turn up for work every day, and how they feel important. It's different in every country. So you really need to kind of realize that you don't understand everything again, and you need to just empathize, just build some empathy with them. Um, Second thing really is to kind of spend time in market. It's much more difficult now with the pandemic, obviously, but to be able to go, whether it's to sit down in Paris with leaders of the French business and have a meal with them and understand what's happening in their lives, understanding what's happening with their clients, understanding what you need to do to really kind of hit the right buttons with them is really, really important. So spending time, because that's really how you build trust.
It must put a bit of pressure on hiring the right people. Then you talk about living or being in market with the team, and then not being able to well, I guess, accept the pressure of knowing everything and therefore relying on the team. Um, how much of a factor then is that finding the right people, or
Yeah.
is it about then developing your own people? Take me through that thing from your own point of view about how to.
Yeah. I think if you have a look at what's happened in the world in the past, it's not surprising that new leaders come in and then bring people they've worked with before in as well, because it's a lot easier if you've already been through the trenches in a certain different company with somebody else, if you're going to build the trust and then leave them to run a region or to run a country. So finding people that you've worked with before that you can trust and putting them into those roles kind of helps because you already have a relationship. That doesn't always work, and I've been lucky enough to find some fantastic people in markets outside of where I live, and spending time with them, trusting them, and allowing them to kind of get on with it. Because effectively, that's what I learned when I was running Australia for Canadian companies, that I just wanted to be left alone and trusted to be able to make good decisions, and they were able to build that, to do that with me. So I in turn learned that, I guess, and found the best person I could find to run a Singapore-based business in Southeast Asia, and just make sure that he or she felt that I was available if they needed me, and they felt supported, and when they really needed something, that I was listening.
Fantastic. So these days, of course, Potentia CEO, different in a sense that this time the CEO role of an international office is in Australia, so the Australian head office, but
Yep.
international office. So how does this circumstance change things in terms of leadership, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. Had a great time at Potentiate, but it's a complete reversal. After working for a North American company and hoping that they understood me, the reverse has happened now. I'm leading an Australian company that has international offices, and all of a sudden I have colleagues in America, France, UK saying, my market's different, Peter. You need to understand this about my market. Please understand that I respect what you do in Australia, but this is different. And I've had to listen to that, and I've just been really reminded of what was important to me when I was in a smaller part of the business, and what used to frustrate me. So again, building empathy and realizing that this time the shoe's on the other foot, and I need to listen. And again, it's the same thing. You can't understand how every market dynamic works everywhere in the world, and you have to find people that you can trust and empower and let them get on with it.
Did you find yourself sitting back going, "Oh wow, that's exactly what I used to say"?
Yeah, so many times, Jace, honestly, like it's all the time.
Yeah. I can imagine. I mean, the shoes on the other foot. It's actually difficult. That's one of the reasons why I thought this topic would be such an interesting one to talk about, because transitioning from that mindset of, I'm in head office, not in head office, I've got international offices, I'm part of an international office, can sometimes carry with it different challenges.
Yeah.
And the ability, you use the word empathize or empathy a couple of times, and that's probably another one that's worth highlighting and remembering, simply because the ability to be able to remember that in those circumstances and situations, to me, sounds like it's pretty important.
Yeah.
The So thinking back, I mean, you've got quite a lot of experience, Pete. We've talked about a couple of different roles, and you've given some pretty decent tips already. But what sort of advice, if you just say you're meeting someone, just say I was looking to make the step into becoming an international leader, and I was looking to either convince others or to prepare myself for a future where I would be able to put myself in a position where people would look upon myself favorably. What sort of advice would you give them to be able to either do that preparation or to be able to step up or to be able to make that transition? Is there anything that you'd like to be able to leave people with?
Yeah, I would say do it. It's a fantastic opportunity. I've learned so much. I've been so lucky. I've had so many great experiences. Running around Japan, trying to win business, and then having a great meal with great people, and catching trains everywhere across Europe, and catching a flight and pitching 3 deals in 3 different countries in one day. It was a very long day. But what stands out there is just so many good experiences with people. So I think that to do it and to just give it a go and be open to. this new model in the world, which I think is about listening to people and making sure that you don't pretend to know everything, or the way you do things in one part of the world is not circuits doesn't have to work, is not going to work everywhere else. So you need to find people that you can trust. And I know it's more difficult now with travel being very limited, but it's not an excuse just to be able to not get to know people. You know, you do Zoom calls, you do whatever you can, you find excuses or ways to actually really understand the people that are in different parts of the world that are part of your team and make them feel important. You need to make sure that you're listening with them. I've always had a rule that the time zones are a difficult thing to manage, certainly this time of the year, and you need to be flexible with your own time. Unfortunately, you know, you can't be as a leader, you can't be the only, you guys in North America or Europe can't be the ones getting up at 11 or staying up to 11 p.m. or getting up at 6 a.m. all the time. You need to take your turn of getting up early or staying up late and show them that, you know, you are a team. And that's just a small example, but, you know, some flexibility in your own time, being available for people, I think is really, really important. And you have to deal with it just as importantly as you deal with anything else that's happening, you know, in the office next door, you know. So it's just as important to kind of support someone in Paris.
Yeah, I think that's probably not a bad way to leave that, because it is very out of sight, out of mind, all those kinds of things. And, you know, understanding markets and giving people responsibility is one thing, but that, again, I'm not sure if you'd call it empathy. Maybe it does fit under that umbrella, but the ability just to understand what others are going through, but also what is happening from their point of view. The time zone thing, oh my God, like that is, in a head office, that's always been a crazy thing. As someone who's, you know, had a couple of similar experiences, you know, the time zone thing and getting the meetings right.
That's one tip I'll give you, is that the thing that used to piss me off more than anything, to be frank, is that I worked for a Canadian company for 12 years, and when we first started, they were open to time zones, but new people keep coming in, and these new people keep sending me meeting requests at 3 a.m. and they keep like time and time again, over and over and over, new people come in, they go, oh my God, I can't believe the time difference. So get to know your time differences. That's actually the 101. Understand that by sending a meeting request at 3 a.m. for London, it's showing that you haven't got a clue you know, about the UK market, or, you know, vice versa. So.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful tip. It's a wonderful tip. Yeah, why weren't you in the meeting? I gave you 8 hours notice.
Yeah. Or you wake up and you've missed a meeting, you know.
That's right. Yeah, good. Well, Peter, I mean, you've transitioned your own career extremely successfully, you know, and I've sort of been able to be close to that. And, you know, your advice is extremely interesting, particularly for people who are looking to make that transition. So again, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
And enjoy the rest of your day.
Nice talking to you, Jace. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Take care.